Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Real Talk Family Life, building shatterproof families, one brick at a time. I am so excited to be here another Tuesday night with you. Please message a friend, call someone, tell them to join us. We have a very interesting conversation this evening. We will be talking about husbands and wives working together to build the family. It doesn't mean that you have to be married to be a part of this conversation. It is not a prescription for being a part of it. If you're thinking about getting married, if you're in a relationship, working towards marriage, if you're single and thinking about marriage, perhaps this is a conversation that you really need to think of so that when you do choose that person, perhaps you understand some more the long-term criteria that should be considered before saying I do. This evening, we have an exciting panel. We are going to look at it from the perspective of our counselors in the community. We have Reverend Joseph Griffith, we have Pastor Anthony Henry, and we have Reverend Dr. Roger Samuel with us tonight. We are going to ask them about their experiences. I'm going to ask you, please, to participate in this session. You can do so anonymously. You can email me privately and ask your question if you do not want to be named, or drop your questions, comments, concerns, rhetorical questions in the chat, and let's really have some conversation about men and women, husbands and wives working together to build the family. As I said, our panelists tonight are esteemed no stranger to this program, so I am going to ask them just to give an opening remark rather than introduce themselves, and then we will jump right in. So Pastor Griffith, I'm going to start with you, then Reverend Dr. Roger Samuel, and then Pastor Henry, opening statements, and we will get right into this evening's program. Unmute your mics. Don't forget to unmute your mics.
Yes. Good night. Good evening again. I want to assert that it's extremely important for me that my wife will work with me together as I build my family. I do not know if there's anybody who would want a situation where they cannot join a spouse or spouses together to make their marriage work. So I think we have a good session tonight.
Well, I am so privileged again to be able to share this experience. It's always enlightening and life-changing to be in real talk, because so much is shared and so much is discussed, and we have an opportunity to learn and to grow and take some tools away in our own situation that will help us to better where we are. So tonight I'm looking forward to this discussion. I believe a lot could be said and would be said that will help us to navigate from where we are to where we need to be. Pastor, and you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Dr. Sutherland, and good evening, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be back on the program with you. Very important subject, building the family. And the idea of building the family says that anything that you are building says that there is work, there is need to work. And sad to say, for those who think that it is just the starry eyes and the pretty faces and what have you that make up the family, after a few months or a few weeks after into the marriage, you realize that those things are but of least importance, and that there is a lot of hard work to put in order to build a family to get to where you would feel proud of those whom you have as a wife and as children or as a husband. Thank you.
Thank you. So what we're going to do tonight is we're not going to prescribe the ideal family. I think we've been speaking about that quite a lot. Man the ideal man from God's perspective, the ideal woman from God's perspective. We're trying to put them together. And we know basically from the programs we've run in May and June, kind of what the ideal looks like. We've spoken about Genesis a number of times this year. We are going to presume that there's a man and woman in marriage living together, and there are some challenges. And so we want to get them back to that ideal. So again, if you know anyone who can benefit from this program, we say reach out to them now. If by chance any of the examples used are speaking to your lifestyle or your situation at the moment, I guarantee you we have not used anyone that we know in these examples, and it is quite by chance. So we're just making sure you know we have not used any real life examples, but they may touch some nerves. So we just want to make sure people are clear that we're just trying to address issues that are affecting not only every family in the world, but Christian families. And we want to get back to that ideal. So our first scenario we're going to use to get into the discussion is one that I found on Lifeway Research by Faith Watley. And she starts the presentation by saying there's a married woman somewhere out there having a one-on-one dinner with a male friend without telling her husband, or perhaps she did tell her husband. Meanwhile, there's a man who's copied his wife on every email correspondence, even on work-related exchanges. This same guy refuses to ride alone in an elevator with any female colleagues. So the point that the author makes is that the first scenario is an example of harmful behavior. The other example is one of unnecessary behavior, and that it is important to make sure we set the right boundaries in place to protect our marriage, our ministry, and above all else, our soul. And this article was written against the backdrop of the scandals that we see in the Christian communities and among Christian leaders. So that's our first topic, pastors, this evening. What about boundaries and what about dysfunction? I'm going to come to Reverend Dr. Roger Samuel first, so you can speak to us either about dysfunction or about setting boundaries.
Thank you, Sasha. Thank you again for being on the program. Family definitely is God's idea. He's the person who instituted family. And so dysfunction starts when we move away from God's ideal plan. And so more and more we are seeing the dysfunction and the different adjustment in what a family should look like. People loving who they choose to and believe that represents family. And the list goes on as to what people, there are so many different new concepts as to what family should look like. And so more and more as we see these things, we're seeing the society is having more dysfunctional behavior and things are shifting in so many different directions. So I believe that dysfunction starts when we move away from God's ideals. So only when we seek to rediscover or reimagine what that looks like, we can start to retract and address the challenges in families and find a path forward. So I believe that, rediscovering and reimagining that idea gives us a sense of where stability starts, where we can be safe again, and where we can build model citizens who will have stable, shatterproof families when we really, consider where we have driven or where we moved away from.
There's so much I want to unpack there, but I'm going to give Pastor Joseph and then Pastor Henry an opportunity to respond to the original question. And then we're going to come back and talk about rediscovery and reimagining. Pastor Griffith.
I remember sometime I was at work and I came down the stairs to get something printed. And I entered into a conversation, and it was something like, the person was saying, but he made himself vulnerable because what was he doing in the drive-in theater with her? That was so many years ago, and I keep remembering that. I think that boundaries are extremely important. And I always think about when I'm driving, come up the highway here by Spring Garden, the two lane, all I need to do, a man come down the other side, miss, and the first miss he make, he's going to hit me. And I said, that line sets boundaries, and it is for my own safety, and it's only aligned. So I think it's important for us to have our standards, to know, and also to be aware about our vulnerability. I like the Bible verse that says that he that thinketh he stand up should take heed lest he fall. And an old lady says to me, Joe, you are a handsome young man. Watch yourself with young girls in the church. Right? And she implied, don't bring dispute. So I think we need to set boundaries. And I will pause on this last one. I remember I went to a lady to counsel one day, and she was home by herself. And when I come into the house, oh no, ma'am, we can do it right in the garage. So boundaries are important.
Yeah.
Pastor Henry.
I am not into rules. I am not into thou shalt not and thou shalt. And so in both cases, I am now going to judge, and I'm going to say that if you know who you are, you know that there's that song that the Sinach is the same, I know who I am. Yeah. Well, the guy was right. Many a times as Christians, we don't tell lies, we sing them. But if you truly know who you are, that you are a child of the King, riding on the elevator with another woman or with a woman, your behavior is going to be like a prince.
I agree.
If you are a daughter of the King, and you choose to go out with somebody, then I am going to trust you as a daughter of the King. I'm not going to, so you could tell me, you don't have to tell me, it's not going to bother me. But then you should behave like a daughter of the King when you conduct yourself. So I think that to a great extent that the foundation of every person's life, where it's built, where it's established, it sort of sets the pattern for the family. And if a man or a woman does not have a good foundation of having that self-awareness of who he is and what she is about, then the family would likely follow in the same sort of a behavior, same sort of a lifestyle that the person has. So if you know who you are as an individual and you're a part of a family, that family is likely going to know where they are, and they're going to understand things like trust and honesty and decency and what have you and so on. And so the boundaries that we set are going to be based on our own spirituality.
Yeah.
And so I think that is very important to understand. It's going to be based on our own foundation as individuals.
You know, while I have to agree with the pastor. Personally, my experience have shown me that they seem as though there are these vulnerable moments that come upon us. And a lot of people, if you talk to a lot of people, they would tell you, I did not expect it would have gone so far. I pause.
And I guess that's the difference when you have an idea of what the ideal is versus social acceptance, because social acceptance is what changes the game. What society bears now as norm and as acceptable. And if you live by those rules and not be reminded of what the ideal should be, then you disregard boundaries, you disregard what is right, and of course, and you go against your own convictions. Yeah.
So the conversation is so fluid and so interesting already. I mean, I can't even move beyond the word interesting. So I'm hearing social acceptance, Dr. Samuel, and I want to jump off there because we were talking about dysfunctional families initially, you know, when we were talking about men and women working together. And I remember one of the examples coming up, and I'm going to ask Pastor Henry as well to speak on this, is a popular well, Willow Smith is popular. Her parents are known or well known, etc. And she practices what is called polyamory. That's just one example of the types of relationships that have moved away from the ideal. And you talk about social acceptance. And, you know, when you think of it, it's so cunning the way that these things are used to make us feel like, okay, just stepping on the line might be okay, or, you know, just going over the line a bit might be okay. So it is okay to have that one-on-one dinner with that male or female friend. It is okay to give that person a ride, or to leave the house to go and render assistance at 11:30 p.m. at night. And so, you know, we're talking about boundaries and what we know as our foundation setting patterns. What if you didn't have those boundaries and foundations before? How do you use your counseling sessions to establish or to help couples establish some of those boundaries? How do you use it to help them resist what is socially acceptable and to embrace completely what is God's ideal? I'm going to start with Pastor Henry on this one, and already I see questions in the chat. So I'm going to give all three reverends the opportunity to respond, and then we'll go straight to the chat and take those questions. Pastor Henry, over to you.
Dr. Sutherland, the thing is, you know, every house or every building that stands firm has a good foundation. And so when you are talking about counseling and starting a family, let me advertise my book. When you are ready for love, and not like what the guy at the custom says to call my book, Ready for Love, How About You? Because that's what a lot of people do to get married. I am ready for love. How about you? Are you ready for love? Let us get married. That's not how it goes. How about love? How about marriage? And once you start to think marriage, you have to think about the foundation that you're going to be building upon as a couple. One of the Old Testament prophets asked the rhetorical question, can two walk together except they be agreed? And so when you get there, I always say, if you want to agree to be like Ananias and Sapphira, you would make a good couple. Perfect couple. If you want to agree in criminal activities, as a couple, you make a good couple. But if one wants to be a criminal and the other one wants to be a saint, you're going to have problems. And so your values, what are your values going to be? Because now we are talking about your mission as a marriage, as a married couple. What our mission is going to be? What do we want to achieve? What goals do we want to set for our life, for the family, not for our lives now. So all my personal goals, all my personal achievements, how can I change from the I that I had all along? I will do this, to get to the point where you say, we will. This is ours. And so that's merging the couple's vision into and goal. And then when you have vision and goal, you have to have value. You have to have values. What are the values? And this is where you're talking about. We are talking about the dysfunctionality. What are the values? So that a good family, a family can be built and be strong if it is agreed. Listen to me carefully. If it is agreed between the 3 people or 4 people that are going to make up this family, because that's what polyamory is all about. One lady decides she wants to have 3 husbands. And so the 3 husbands decide, yes, it's all right for us to be husbands with this one wife. It's not the ideal, but it's agreed. And so you find that there may be harmony, there may be a lot of things that is missing in the Christian family, or a lot of things that may be different and working better than in the Christian family, where there is no agreement, where there is no purpose, where there is no value, and everybody is doing their own thing. So it is important, it is very important that for people who are thinking about marriage, that you establish your values, that you establish what you are seeing down the road, not just in front of you, but you are establishing. So you're 20 years of age, 22 years of age. What is the next 50 years going to look like? Where are we going to be in the next 50 years? What do we want to be in the next 50 years? And 10 years after that, we have grandchildren. What do we want our grandchildren to be looking like? And so the legacy that we are going to live and that we are going to develop and build, we want that to pass to our children, on to our grandchildren.
It's open to you, Pastor Griffith and Reverend Samuel. Feel free to jump in.
Well, the pastor ended by saying, what are we going to look like the next 50 years? Old, probably lonely. And I think if we can remember that, again, I ultimately will ask myself, what would it take me to avoid my loneliness or avoid when I get old, those things that I might not enjoy? So in other words, somehow I think that my relationship must be adding to that. It has to be part of the investment. And if that's the case, then I might have to, if we should have agreed at first, Pastor mentioned on those values, what are the things that I hold dear to me? For example, family. How do we define family? I keep saying family for me is myself, my father, myself, my wife, and my children. And my siblings are my father's children. And I think that if we can define family like that, I feel that how family should be defined. I think so. I don't call it nuclear, call whatever. And once we understand that I think a lot of the trouble that we get will move away, right? But we must have those values, those things that we think that will hold our family together, or that will add to me as I invest in my later years. Again, I repeat, that is important because so many things can cause me to say, I'm going to walk away from this marriage, or I'm going to hold my fort and I'm not going to change. But ultimately, am I not investing in something tomorrow?
I think as I reflect on both, especially, since the Pastor Henry said, even though a person may start off initially not knowing those things, I think once then the pathway and counsel is involved where they're able to look deeply into what love is about, family is about, somehow, it starts, somehow I feel they get a point where they recognize something divine comes into the whole idea of family. And willing to make that sacrifice, that self-sacrifice, I think also helps, it's not just about what I want, but it's also being considerate of what is going to work best for both of us. I think when you start to step into this area, it makes you begin to see just beyond your selfish views and your own opinion. It makes you kind of begin to understand, something is far greater involved in this. And it triggers some insight into people's lives, because I've had couples in talking with them who had no idea, but God, no thought, but somehow in the conversation, when we went into these principles that requires them to look beyond their own needs and consider the needs of the other person, something about that starts a certain interest in their heart that they begin to, inquire and become more curious, that you're able to teach other principles that they can now build. And that's why, as Pastor Henry said, it's so important to have an initial understanding of where we're heading, so we can consider where, what we need to get to where we're going. Because like in those 5 innate questions, who am I? Why am I here? What is my purpose? Where am I going and how am I planning to get there? So somewhere when I begin to think about, okay, I want to go here, or this is where I tend to arrive, But how am I going to get there? Then I realized it might require something that I never thought of. And maybe I need to now consider, and that of itself will make me begin to, think deeply about my desires and my quests. And hopefully the counselor, whoever is there, might shed some more light that starts different conversation.
Dr. Sutherland, you're muted. Can I just rebut a bit, please? Let me share a typical example. I was counseling a couple once. And so I try to pull as much as to what you want to achieve, what you want to do, and so on. And in counseling, I discovered that the gentleman wanted to be a politician. On the flip side, the lady wanted just a quiet life with a husband, not a lot of friends. And I said, well, I'm not sure how you are going to make this, because definitely, if you want a quiet life, not a lot of friends, your husband cannot achieve his goal or his visions. Right. So, what are you going to do? And the gentleman, after, was so much in love that he said, well, I think I would have to give up my dream. But that is dangerous also, isn't it? They're still together. They're still together.
Dangerous. Yeah, good for him.
He hasn't followed his dream as yet to be a politician.
As yet, I like that part. As yet, I think it's so instrumental what you just gave as an example, Pastor Henry, and it talks about, again, how much are you willing to compromise for the other person, but at the same time allow a person to be their whole self. We always talk about being your whole self before you give yourself to someone else, and knowing who you are before you bring someone else into your world, or you try to have this vision or this mission for another person. But I want to tap back to what Reverend Dr. Samuel just said when he spoke about the 5 purpose questions: who, what, where, why, and how. So we get married. Obviously, we know this as individuals. We've had that exchange. We've come to the compromise. We've set a vision and a mission for our marriage. And so we say, good, we're there. 5 years into this marriage, and the boat begins to rock, right? Things get shaky. We start getting these challenges. What advice do you give to a couple, Pastor Samuel, when that boat starts to rock? And I come to you because you make an interesting point about, person's willingness to change. And that seems to be a challenge, not just in the world, but in Christian families, right? And especially now, where we go back to that social acceptance. I am a female, I am empowered, and I have all these dreams that I want to do, and ain't nobody gonna stop me from doing it. Or I am man of the household, you do what I say, etc. And it seems like there is this pull, we're not discounting the fact that we wrestle against, not just flesh and blood, but principalities and powers. How do we see it for what it is? And how do we get back to that place where we are of one accord, where we look back to the vision statement or the mission statement? Pastor Samuel.
I think, and that's why the shared values is important, and we have a sense of what we're about and where we're going. I also believe, because I could just sometimes imagine, I have an opinion, she has an opinion, and we're both trying to, which win, who opinion wins, and you get to the point where, okay, is it the right way, the wrong way? And like in many conversations we've had, like even earlier with Pastor Henry, what's best? And sometimes we have to, come to the point where what's best for us, as opposed to what I prefer and what you prefer, but what's best. And to come into the point where we can accept what is best for the relationship and not just as best for us as individuals. It goes to that point that you make, having that ability and willingness to change. Because we can have great conversations, great arguments, we look at different type of perspective, but the idea is, how willing am I to change? Because that is where it really makes the difference. because the change can be experienced. The change is realistic. The change can be accomplished. But sometimes it seems difficult and impossible, not because it is impossible to be achieved, just I am not willing to make that change. And so so I think if couples are willing to recognize, okay, what's best for us is what matters based on God's plan for our lives, I am willing, therefore, to make that change. I'm willing, therefore, to make that sacrifice so that we can achieve what's best. Because if not, we'll be pulled in my direction or your direction. And sometimes we may be both right or we could be both wrong, but the idea is what's best for us. So it gives us a chance to look beyond our own personal desires and needs and see going forward what will help us to accomplish, what will help us to get a better place. And that requires me personally willing to revisit, like I said over and over, what was our mission statement initially? What were the things we agree upon initially? And we can visit it to see, have we gotten to a place where it is still realistic? We can say, or have I deviated from the things we first agreed upon? And then we can realize, okay, well, one of us went astray, and then we need to then come back together and see this is what we started with and how we can get back to where we need to go by keeping, true to the things we first agree upon and willing. Because, in life as you go along, things happen, you're influenced by different things in the world, social acceptance, etc. And we have to honestly admit I was distracted. I moved away from the things. So I am willing to admit, to accept, and willing to change and make that adjustment so we can achieve what's best for us based on God's idea for family, because family, again, is God's idea, not ours. So I believe that is where, and that statement keeps ringing over and over my head. The willingness to change. How willing am I? Because I could always say, you, but how willing am I? Am I willing to make that adjustment? Am I willing to accept responsibility for my action? Am I willing to go the extra mile? Am I willing to make this sacrifice? Am I willing? And that, I think, is a question we all have to ask ourselves. How willing am I to do what's best for us and not just what's best for me as an individual?
Wow, that is so profound. And sometimes the answer to that is I'm not very willing, right? If we're being honest with ourselves, sometimes the answer to that is I'm not willing to do that. And it's not that you're beyond help at that time, you seek the intervention. So we're going to pause there only because I want to make sure we get to the chat. And I know, Pastor Henry, you kind of alluded to this before, but just for the benefit of everyone, I'm going to ask you to address this question. Should boundaries be agreed upon by the couple? This went back to the opening scenario that we presented. And you did say you're not necessarily in favor of establishing you can't or you shouldn't, etc. So I'm going to ask you to take that question. Should boundaries be agreed upon by the couple?
Yes, so basically those kind of boundaries that you somehow don't allow for growth and for experience and for development. Because as Pastor Griffith says, the boundaries are there to protect you, but they keep you within that lane also. You don't get the opportunity to explore. And I'm not saying that you're going to explore into a danger lane and get into trouble. But I'm saying that you still need the elasticity to be able to. And that is based, again, that is not just simply based on doing what you want. It is doing who you are. Right. So if you read Paul's argument to the Corinthians when he says to them, and the truth is, let me say this has been one of our problems with the Christian church over the years. We have told people what they shouldn't do. Don't do this, don't do the other, don't do the other. But we haven't told them who they are. And so back to the Corinthians, Paul was talking about fornication. And after he told them you shouldn't get involved in fornication, he doesn't say because the law says so or this says so. He says, but you remember, you are bought with a price. You're a child of God. Therefore, honor God with your body. And so there is that higher level of spirituality. And so crossing boundaries, setting boundaries is just to help us to know the path in which we are going. You see, we want to have 10 children. So the monies that we are going to spend on parties and entertainment, we can't because we want 10 children. And minding 10 children in this day and age is a lot of, a lot of things. And if for some reason after 2 or 3, the doctors say you can't have more and you're going to achieve that goal, you have to adopt, like more money. So those boundaries help you to go in the path that you have decided in your mind that you want to go. I want to, I have had my education at a particular level, probably my master's, got married. Are we going to stay there? We're going to stay with the master's, or are we going to go on to get the PhD, as the case may be? That is going to take more money. So that those boundaries help there. But when we talk about boundaries as to who we are, it is who we are that are the boundaries. And so let me say that you don't just establish them hard, fixed, written in the ground. You can't do anything beside that. Whereas you have certain guidelines, you're supposed to be able to develop. And as Pastor Samuel said, not only the willingness to change from the wrong to the right, but the willingness to develop, to understand, to grasp a truth. Like today I was talking to gentlemen, I was saying, and one guy was having problems with the whole idea of forgiveness. And I said to him, so, forgiveness is not just simply forgiving someone. Forgiveness is premeditated. What are you talking about? That before the person did the wrong, I have to forgive them? Yes, you have to premeditate. Like the man who premeditates that he is going to commit murder, to forgive, you have to do the same thing. I don't think so. When they do the wrong, I would forgive them. Where's the willingness to change? That is growth. You see, that is spiritual growth. You understand that God premeditated in forgiving us, and that God forgive us simply because he had planned to even before we sinned. Jesus Christ, the Lamb of God, slain from the foundation of the world, is there. So that as you set these boundaries, you can't hem yourself in when new truth comes to light. You understand what I'm saying? So when you receive new truth, you must be willing to develop and allow the family to grow and to experience the greater things.
Thank you, Pastor Henry. Forgiveness as premeditation is kind of like an ouch in the spirit, right? I laugh, but it's a very serious thing, that to think that before this person breaks trust in any way, or before this person hurts, I should have adopted that Jesus mentality to say, I will forgive no matter what. Because when I took those vows, that was a part of it. That was a part of the deal, that it's not just about me being comfortable. And I love how it's linked to willingness to change, because naturally you want to tell that person where to get off, or you want to say, I'm done with this. But the prescription is that, no, you have to forgive, and not just once, but 70 times 7. In a day, exactly. It's difficult. And I think if people really understood the prescription, I like that word, we would think long and hard before we started getting into marriages where 5 years down the line, Christian couples are saying, I'm done. So we hope that tonight is really a blessing. We don't just want to preach the word and talk fact and truth. That is necessary. But we also want to give practical examples for how you deal with marriages that are rocky, or how you build upon a foundation that you think is already strong. So next question.
Just before you go, I just want to add 1 second that the question said, do these boundaries have to be agreed on by the couple. I just want to say this. I believe that there are boundaries that we as a couple set, but there are boundaries that I personally need to set. That's all.
Okay, and I just scrolled down. So forgive us, guys, I'm going to be going back and forth. Someone asked, how are I'm presuming that it is following from the question of how does the couple set the boundaries, or should the boundaries be agreed upon, sorry. And the follow-up question by someone else is saying, how are the boundaries set in that case? So it comes to one of those 5 purpose questions. So I don't know who wants to take it. So we answered the question, should the boundaries be agreed upon? Pastor Griffith added the fact that you don't just set couple boundaries, but you also set your own individual boundaries. And Pastor Henry is suggesting that that comes out in who we are as a person. Dr. Samuel is talking about the vision. And if we know where we want to go, then we kind of establish those boundaries along the way, because we know what we want, therefore what we don't want, we don't entertain, is what I'm hearing. And so the follow-up question then is, how, if you were to give advice on how you set those boundaries, does that come in the vision and mission statement? So short answer, and then we'll jump to the next question. So anybody can respond.
I want a big quick. I want a big quick. I'm going to actually ask a question rather than talk there. Listen to you there, Doctor. It seems to me as though that these boundaries have some kind of evolution about them. And I'm beginning to think there based on how you just summarized there. iPods.
Yeah, if you know, for those, let me talk to my friends in Trinidad. If you are leaving Port of Spain to go to the east, all will go well until you get to, you're going east, all is well on the journey until you get to Uriah Butler intersection.
Mm-hmm.
Because at that point, you can continue going east or you can go south. And so what happens is that most marriages, people set boundaries for the first 5 years and they get them as far, they're all going east together and they get as far as Uriah Butler Highway. And then the intersection comes up on them. Where do we go? Do we continue to go east? Or do we continue to go south? And so one person wants to go south at this time, the other wants to go east. And oftentimes that's where it, you know, you have to develop the communication skills with these sort of boundaries that you are setting, because of what happens, why sometimes one person ends up going to the east and the other say, I am going south, and you know what has to happen there for that to happen? The big D comes in. That's because many a times people are talking, nobody is listening, nobody is trying to hear what let me take back the word, not hear what the other person is saying. You're not listening to feel what the other person is saying. And so when you start to feel what the other person is saying, you start to enter into why San Fernando is important. And the person who wants to go to San Fernando understands why going to the east is important. And somehow, somewhere along the point, what you realize that a new vision, a new horizon comes. So instead of going to the east or going south, we may probably end up somewhere in what's the place, Cunupia or somewhere across the road. But that's we, not just you going there, but we are going. And so the relationship stays together. The visions have changed, the boundaries have changed, but we stay together because we agreed together that you will not have San Fernando and I will not have Arima, but we are going to be going together to Cunupia. That's the hard work in marriage, and people need to understand that.
And can I suggest to Pastor Henry that as couples submit to God, I think the other element is purpose, because somehow we can have our own idea like you just described and so on, but I think God, because there's some things that is not known by that couple initially, or some things will unfold as you journey, because God could then unfold the elements to your life that will just play out, and you have to be supportive of each other Yeah, but because you are shared values and you're submitted it to God and you're moving in that same direction, even like you just described, the vision emerges. And as God reveals the other element, you are able to come alongside each other and encourage that peace that was not fully known. Because you could start off in a relationship, for example, a couple start off and they having a good time, and one discovered, they have a passion for God, but they discover along the journey, you're going to be a pastor. It wasn't clearly understood before. And then the wife says, well, I didn't settle for this. I don't think I want to be a first lady. And here you are going to be in front of everyone. And this changes the whole equation. Mm-hmm. But as they continue in prayer, they can say, you know what? It is not what I settled for, but let us pray together. Let's see. And then eventually, that person gets the confirmation or witness or whatever that, you know what, I will submit to this and I will support, either one in this part of their journey. So I think sometimes these are the elements that unfolds as we journey, or you can start off being, like, for example, in David's case, they start off being a psychologist or whatever. Now he's a politician. Mm-hmm. That may not have been something that was planned pre or before, but we have an idea. Our mission is to support each other regardless of where life takes us. And when that happens, it may change our life in terms of our life becomes more public, more exposed. And what are we going to do to support each other in a case like that? So I'm saying that in a case like that, he has Kathleen who will support and encourage. So I think purpose is so important. And as we submit to God, as things change like you just described, we're able to come alongside each other and say, it may not have been what I thought about, what I prefer, but I'm going to encourage this because this is part of our purpose. It may not have been fully known before, but we're going to, so like you said, it changed from Grandy. We wouldn't have this, but we will have whatever God is now, making known to us. But as they have to also submit to God so they can have, it may not be fully understood initially or fully supported, but as they submit to God together. Would you agree with that, Pastor Henry?
Yes, but with one caveat, Pastor Samuel, that there are times when both people don't get that understanding.
Yeah.
And things get real bad.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, what happens is that the Christian comes to you and they're thinking about divorce. I say to any Christian who is thinking about divorce, if you are thinking about it, don't go and see a divorce lawyer. Don't take what you have for yourself in the future and what you have yourself for your children and give it to a divorce lawyer. Sorry for those divorce lawyers who are listening to me tonight, but left to me alone, you would have to find another profession. But don't do it. And there is a scriptural principle to follow if you ever get to that point where you no longer can agree, right? Lot and Abraham worked together all their lives. And there came a time when they couldn't agree. And the person who was spiritual, the man who was spiritual in it, he says to the guy who wasn't, take whatever you want, anything you want, just have it. Because Abraham operated from an understanding of abundance, that it was God who gave me all of this. I can give it away to him. God is going to give me more. And so you want to settle it, anything the person wants. The person wants to leave the relationship. They want to get out because somehow they don't understand what you're doing. You know that you are a child of God. Then do the next thing that God would do. Give them everything that they want and let them go.
I think we just pause for 5 seconds and let that one sink in. give them what they want and let them go.
The house, the land, the car, everything that they want.
I'll keep doing.
You keep doing?
Yes. Yes.
That's a hard pill to swallow. We're getting a lot of thumbs up, by the way. You know, people are listening and they're hearing, and we're going to deviate from the script because there are a few questions in the chat, and I think it's fantastic if we can address questions that people might have, because that too helps to strengthen families. So, Brother Arthur, good night to you. I know you wouldn't mind me calling your name. He asks, how does your family of origin influence your own family values? And does that create conflict? If it does, how do we resolve it? How does your family of origin influence your own family value? And does that create conflict? If it does, how do we resolve? I'm going to leave it open.
I'll respond to it. And I think what he's in fact trying to say is that he's confessing that how we grew up in our house invariably will impact on who we are. So I believe that the person saying that, I say yes. How we grow up will invariably develop how we are, how we think, whether we study, whether we watch Ms. and Booms, or we watch the news or the newspaper, or we like repair vehicles. So we will invariably be impacted. The question about negative now would be, I think he's bringing it into the new relationship. And in every instance, both of us are coming from an environment where we've been impacted by that family. And invariably, if we must realize that we're making a new family. This is where the idea of compromising, the idea of giving up, because we are in flat blending things together. And I wonder to what extent, whether in marriage, we are realizing that we are really bringing these different backgrounds together. And perhaps because we come in, we don't realize that we are building a new union. We end up bringing back totally everything wholesale from our past experience. And perhaps that is one of the problems. So I'm saying, yes, we invariably will bring over what we have been taught and experienced, but we must also realize that we now need to take that and to build a new relationship. Therefore, I say that this is now my family that we are building.
I think everyone is affected by that in some kind of way. And it goes back to something I would have said earlier, where, you know, if we subscribe to the principles of God and we are then able to see, okay, what's best for us. This is our family. If family is God's idea, what principles did God lay out for the success of families that we both can, you know, subscribe to and submit to and be guided by? And even though we're influenced by our family of origin, we see what about that is healthy and what about that is not so healthy. And then, you know, use God's word as the guiding factor going forward, you know, as to how do we build our family? What do we want? Where do we see ourselves going? And what is God's idea for us? Even though we are appreciative of where we came from, but we have to see how has it impacted us, negatively or positively, and what we need to change and adjust going forward to ensure our family does not just take on the idea of other families, but take on the idea that God wants for our family and be guided by that. Because, I mean, even though other people counsel you how they dealt with things, you are not them, we're different people. But what does God want for your family? What's God's idea for your family? And I think it's resolved when both persons are willing to change and willing to accept God's plan for their lives and be guided by that, to ensure, what is subscribed to is based on what God wants for them. And that's my 2 cents. Pastor, and you could take it.
Let me share a story with Brother Arthur, because I refer to the things that he's talking about as baggage. And I'm going to share my own personal story, Brother.
I forget the love, man. It's around with the book. Go ahead, Pastor, and release the love talk.
So I was married. All of you, I think you know that I was married. My first wife died. And 3.5 years later, I got married again. My first wife's name was Magna. And so the first morning of my honeymoon, I got up and I said, Magna, how are you doing? How was your night? I heard myself, but I couldn't correct it. The second wife's name is Cheryl, but the baggage from the old relationship came. And so let me tell you what I did. When I was confronted, I said, my dear, that's only proof that I have never slept with another woman in all my life since my wife died. So be smart, be wise, acknowledge what you do, realize this baggage, and be willing to drop it at some point in time.
I have to get a copy of that book. Thank you. May I take a minute, Dr. Sullivan, please forgive me, but let me take a minute to market this book. It carries so many things. For those of us who are thinking about love, considering marriage, this is the book you need to get. But Art, if you don't have a copy, buy 6. In case you forget one, take one on your job, one in the car, one in the office, one on you, one in your pocket, a soft copy on your laptop, and share it with friends. So much, because personally, that simple statement was so profound without having to give a lot of, like I tried to give a long explanation. Your short statement blow everything I said out of the water. So there are lots of people who need that to be guided and to understand that sometimes what we classify as traits and whatever is baggage that we can get rid of and accumulate new skills for this new relationship. What's best? So get that book, please. That's the book that will answer half of the question.
Thank you, Dr. Samuel. Another question. What advice can the team give to a young male who firmly believes and practices setting boundaries, but to maintain the integrity of his relationship, but is often ridiculed for his caution, even by friends and colleagues?
If the guy, we can be overcautious to the point we become unrealistic. I think that individual needs to first see if he can listen and to be as objective as he can, and to evaluate whether he's not going overboard, because we can be so insensitive that I might want to say something to a lady normal, but I gotta be careful because she's so touchy that anything I say can be misinterpreted. All right, so we do not want to set boundaries to the point that we become unrealistic, we make our lives uncomfortable or make other people around us too uncomfortable. And I'm saying, when I say that, I am not at all, I continue to support that we must have boundaries, but we don't want to. If we are satisfied that we've examined that our boundaries are not too sensitive or unrealistic, then we should not feel ashamed if we hold a value, because we must have a position anyhow. Boundaries.
Can you read that question one more time?
Sure. What advice can the team give to a young male who firmly believes and practices setting boundaries to maintain the integrity of his relationship, but he's often ridiculed for his caution, even by his friends and colleagues?
You know, sometimes I was talking to someone today and a few days ago, and, you know, depending on what is said to you, you can almost feel bad for doing the right thing. And people can say things to you to make you feel being cautious or having some values and some boundaries, make you look odd, queer, different, strange. And one has to be confident in knowing, you know, knowing that you're doing the right thing is important, as opposed to be feeling bad based on what people are saying. Sometimes you can be made to feel bad because of doing the right. But, you know, what you know must inform what you feel, and not what you feel change what you know. You know, and we must be cautious. So I encourage him to continue to set, like Pastor Griffith says, you know, as long as they're realistic, but take joy in knowing that you're guided by some standards, some values, and the right person will respect you and value you for, maintaining, what guides your values and your life. So I think I will encourage him to continue. If I got it right, if I understood it correctly, I will encourage him to take joy and be encouraged in doing so and not feel bad for doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Pastor, do you want to comment? Or I think you got it right, Reverend Samuel, and not to over spiritualize it, but I'm thinking of being persecuted for Christ's sake, right? Yeah. I'm going to that extreme with it. And so I agree with you that oftentimes we are doing what we know is right, not doing the right thing, but doing what we know is right, doing the right thing. And we're so set apart that it's almost like we are the ones in the wrong, right? When we know we're standing for Christ, we know what we're doing is going to benefit my family. I'm assuming that this young man has a vision and a purpose for whatever relationship he's in. And so he's not sending mixed messages to other females, and so he's either being made fun of or, as he said, being ridiculed, etc. for it. And that is where you kind of have to dig your heels in and say, I will stand my ground, even if it's just me. But I also want to encourage him that it's not just him, that there are good men out there, that there are men who believe in family, believe in relationship, want to do the right thing. And you are not alone. Oftentimes we think that we're alone. And I think that's one of the reasons why communities like this is so important, so that we know that there are like-minded individuals with whom we can gather strength and encouragement from. So thank you for responding as well, Dr. Samuel, because we need individuals to know that you have to stand for Christ. You have to stand for something. I'm not saying, don't show empathy and compassion for people, but if we love Christ, we will hate what is not of him. And, that's where we get the opportunity to link biblical principles to what we walk out as Christians. Pastor Henry, over to you.
So Christian, our identity, that's where this whole question lies. If you don't know who you are, right, and you are who you say, who your boundaries, your values are, if you don't know that, then people will have you drifting all over the place. You have to know. You just don't sing it. I know who I am. I'm a child of the King. Listen, I'm a child of the King. This is my family. This is the King's family, God's family. And so you talk as much as you want. You're not going to deceive me. You do as much as you want. You dress how you like. You're not going to seduce me. So the only thing that is left is open confrontation, and I'm ready to die. So how are you going to get? Yeah, that's where we need to bring our Christian people. The devil only has 3 forms of attack. The first is deception, and if you are not going to allow yourself to be deceived because you know who you are, that is failed. Then it's seduction. If you don't allow yourself to be seduced because, like Joseph, you're now going to do this thing and sin against your God. And if you know that, listen, like Job, he's coming to kill you, then, to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. So you lose. Anyhow you take it, Satan, you lose. Hope my brother gets it right. So hold your grounds, my brother. Don't bother with what the friends say. Hold your grounds. Be a Christian.
And the last question we see in the chat, and still dealing with families, but this is a heavy one. How do you deal with a narcissistic spouse?
She's daughter? Is that person a daughter?
No, it doesn't say. Are you a doctor?
No. I don't think he's going to prescribe what I'm thinking he is going to prescribe on the program by asking if the person is a doctor.
Right. What I was in fact trying to say was, what qualified that person to determine that person is in that fat state of mind? If we know that person, that state of mind, it does appear to me as though some sort of help. professional help is needed. I pass on to the big guns.
I'm still interested in getting an answer to the question, only to the
Yes,
extent
yes.
that, you know, I have been close to a family where I'm not sure that divorce was the ultimate end. I believe there is some separation, but after that separation, you know, there was always this talk about the person, one of the spouses being a narcissist and how that person operated, and having been married for more than 15 or 20 years to that person, one of the partners just could not take it anymore. And it is only in hindsight, you kind of think, oh my gosh, how did I miss this? Or how did I miss this? But then you wonder, well, am I really, you know, siding or being judgmental? So I am actually in, even if the person is not, you know, able to prescribe or to say or to diagnose narcissism, I think it's still a valid
of course
question, to the extent that there are persons who are dealing with partners, with spouses, who make them feel like
Yes.
they're the worst, and that it's only because that person is narcissistic. So I'm still interested in getting a response to it.
One of our problems in the Christian church is that we do not see mental disorder as a form of sickness.
Unfortunately.
And so if a person experiences a mental disorder, we tend to think that the person is either in the spiritual community, we think that the person is demon possessed, they're sinful, what have you.
Yes, yes.
Some of these mental disorders are physical in nature because their mind is being affected. And sometimes people need help. Some people grow into narcissism because of the way they were brought up and the way that they were you know, they found that they were exposed to. Thank you, Pastor Griffin. But the truth is that whatever the person is, condition the person is in, that person needs help. Whether he's just a sinner, needs to be saved by the grace of God, he needs help. And we need to recognize that. Thank God, within the Christian circle, we are getting people who are trained and are willing to look at these type of illnesses and able to help some of these people. Some of them, the same narcissistic person living on some drugs, or as the case may be, would be able to control his narcissism, would be able to control his bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, etc. And so we need to understand that it's not the end of the world if your husband or wife has a mental breakdown. It is just another opportunity to help that person by showing the grace of God. Again, if the person doesn't want to get help, that's a different story.
So Pastor Henry, I think we can spend a bit more time on this because the person has clarified that they're dealing with that. So I even just want to say like a 15-second prayer just to say, you know, one, we thank you for being vulnerable on the program. And I think this is an opportunity for deliverance and breakthrough, perhaps not tonight, but I just want to pray that God will cover and encamp around you, that he will continue to protect you, that he will give you the grace and the wisdom to deal with this situation, that he will comfort you in the nights when you feel like you don't know where else to go. I pray that you will continue to trust that you serve a God who can do exceedingly and abundantly above what you can ask, think, or imagine. I pray that you would continue to recognize that you serve a God who knows your end from your beginning. And he says that your former will be great, your latter will be greater than your former. He knows you by name. He knew you before you knew yourself. He knitted you in your mother's womb. And so I pray that whatever we say tonight will be some help to you. And I pray that even after this, you would reach out to one of the ministers who are here tonight to seek any additional help that you desire. I pray that God will continue to shower you with his love and with his grace. I pray that your community will come around you and that you will be able to see this situation through and come out and overcome with your own testimony. Amen. So I just want to say, you know, if you think any of our initial responses were, you know, just not sensitive enough, we apologize for that. But we do recognize that this is a situation someone is dealing with. So Reverend Dr. Roger Samuel, I'm also going to ask you to jump in here. If I am in a situation where I feel like I'm dealing with a spouse that's narcissistic, I don't know if children are involved, how do I navigate that, and how do I seek help? I don't know what location this person is in, but can you share resources, places that we can go for help if we are dealing with someone who has a mental disorder, mental illness, or behaviors that are not quote unquote normal, and how we can offer support in that situation, or how we can seek support for ourselves in that situation?
Well, we can call 221-2223. That's one number I can offer for sure. They can call. There are quite a few therapists there that might be able to suggest. That's 221-2223.
That's Trinidad area code.
Yes, 868-221-2223. That there's some intervention that can be provided to adjust that. And I think Pastor Henry gave some very good description just now, and I don't want to overstate it. And there are people who are able and willing to provide intervention and support. You can reach out to that number that I just gave. I don't know if there's any number for persons in Barbados that you have at the moment, or you can reach out to one of us on the program after, and we can see how best we can guide you. Depending on where you are, we might be able to put you in touch with someone who'll be able to provide some type of intervention or give some, initial support, and then refer you depending on how severe the need is. But we are happy that you're able to join us and at least participate in this discussion, so we want to have any further discussion without having a direct conversation with that person.
Exactly.
So we want to just tell you, if you reach out, we can find ways to support you and help you through this process. Yeah, and if you're not in Trinidad, if you reach out to us after, we'll be able to recommend and guide you accordingly. But thank you for your response.
Yes, thank you. Good night, and I'd want to acknowledge Dr. Bertram Jones, who's on the program tonight, and actually poses another question. What can a person do if the narcissist does not want help or believes that he or she is okay? I don't know if that's prolonging, but the question was just dropped in.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult to, it is like dealing with a sick person who doesn't want to go and see a doctor.
Yeah.
It is that difficult. And so you are paining, you're having all sorts of things. And so at some point in time, I think in most countries, you can go and see a public health person, right? In Trinidad, you have these doctors over at the St. Anne Psychological Center, and you go there and you place a report, and they will try to get hold of the person, especially if the person is doing things that are not normal. And you have to take into consideration that oftentimes a person is so much into themselves with the narcissist, being narcissistic, or, they can do things to injure themselves, to injure others. And so if it gets to a point like that, where you suspect that the person would do something that would either cause injury to themselves or to others, then you would want to have them. I don't like to use the word committed, but that's the word that they use, that you have the person committed to a public health institution where they can get help. If you have the money, go see you go talk to a private professional and have them help you along. Talk to them, they would know how to get help for the person.
Thank you, Pastor Henry. Thank you, Dr. Jones, for raising the question. I think that's exactly what he was trying to do, like get additional comments on the help. And thank you, Dr. Samuel and Pastor Joseph. So it's about 8:45. If anyone has any more questions, I'm just gonna kind of come back to the running order by asking, in light of everything that we've discussed tonight, I want to spend some time, perhaps the last 10 minutes or so before we wrap up, asking our counselors to list one principle or one virtue that you think a couple must consider or must share together if they're to strengthen their families? What's one thing? So by the end of tonight, we'll have 3 because each of you will talk about something different. one principle or virtue that couples must share if they're to strengthen their families.
I would like to start by talking about something we've discussed many times before, the idea of empathic listening. That listening without judgment, suspending your thoughts and your feelings and just engaging your heart, being able to understand where that person is, what they're dealing with, what they're going through, and giving them that opportunity to share and to express themselves. I think oftentimes we process conversation with so much judgment and opinions that we don't take time to understand what's really going on with that person. And I think sometimes a lot of situation goes unnoticed and taken for granted, and it escalates into major issues because we never take time to really understand. We are so busy ready to respond before we understand. We're so busy trying to give our take on it without trying to really see where that person is. And I think in couples and families, there's such a need to listen empathically. And I think that's one of the virtue, I believe, if marriages, if couples, if family engage and truly demonstrate that particular virtue, it will really help the family to navigate and move through difficult moments, because sometimes a person could be saying something and you're going back and forth and you lift your voice, just to gain grounds, to win the argument, you lift your voice or you say hurtful words just to subdue them. And sometimes you may win the argument, but damage the relationship. And it's not about winning the argument, it's about saving the relationship. And sometimes the way you save that relationship is not by trying to say what you think and what you feel, it's just trying to simply understand what's going on with my spouse, what's going on with my son, my daughter, and just give them that. It may not make sense to you, but it's really not about you. It's just you being present and trying to understand and help them work through that moment. And somewhere along the line, answers will come and whatever is needed will be available. But first, just start with listening empathically to your spouse or to your children. That particular virtue, I think, is necessary. And we don't have to demonstrate it enough because we want to be heard and we want to share our opinion. And sometimes that is not what is needed at the moment.
Right.
I think for me, marriage should be seen as, we start with a 2-man team, meaning that in order for we to win, we got to work together. And we can't be a team. You know what I'm saying? Your loss is my loss, your win is my win.
Yeah.
And when children come into the picture, they actually become team players on it. So I think that if there's one thing that's important for us going forward is to see ourselves as being on the team, a team. And when I consider team, I like to know that everybody have a general idea of what is going on. It means that you need to look around and like, that marble on the ground get caused me to fall down. So you can take it up. You know what I mean? Or you find that I am thirsty and want a little water, you pause and give me a little water because I must continue to run this race. So I think the whole idea of team must be embraced if we are supposed to have good families. And if we've talked about the weakest link in the chain, and if we understand that success comes by us working as a team, then I guess the issue of compromising, the issue of going the extra mile, the issue of wanting to continue wouldn't really be some issue. It would be easier because we are a team and we must win together, Pastor. And we said earlier that we got to end up together at the same place. Team is my keyword here. His mic is off.
I would think that all of us have had, most of us, if not all of us, have had the experience of biting our tongue.
Yes.
It's the most painful of experiences. But I wonder if the tongue had the ability to bite back the teeth or to knock out the teeth. I wonder how many of us would be pleased. The point I'm making that in every relationship, when the teeth bite the tongue, you just have to, tongue has to just take the bite, forget it, and live together. And so the key here is forgiveness. The key is forgiveness, forgetting. And if you are in a relationship with somebody and something is done wrong, always start off by saying, it was not intended to hurt me. So there's no need for me to make the person understand how I feel by hurting them. Because when you do that, it becomes intentional. Right. I think in my years of counseling, there was only one gentleman that I met who had an outside child and thought it was all right. Just one, thought that it was all right. It was just how he was cultured and what have you. His whole family lived that kind of a life. And he didn't see anything wrong with it. But generally, when something like that happened, the guy knows that he is wrong. Never intended to get caught, never intended to go down that road. And somehow it is his passion, his desires that he got deceived, seduced, finds himself in that situation. Is it grounds to divorce? No, sometimes as Christians, we need to sit down like Jesus, put our heads in the ground, take something in our hand, write whatever we want in the sand, and then say, neither do I forgive you. Go sin no more. Because if I throw the stone, I can't throw the stone because I too have sinned. I am not perfect before God. And so we remember ourselves and we forgive. And that becomes easy when in the relationship we premeditate forgiveness. We plan to forgive even before the person has done anything wrong. We tell ourselves that if the person has done this, if the other person was ever to do this, I will forgive. And you talk yourself into believing it, that I will forgive because I want to be like Jesus Christ. I want to forgive. And I think that if every member of the family builds that sort of a virtue into the relationship, into his personal life, being a forgiving person. And as Christians, sometimes we talk these things. You listen to a man like Nelson Mandela. My goodness me, years in prison. And he had all the time to think, if I only grasp power in South Africa, what I'm going to do with these apartheid people. But he came out and he forgave. He forgave. So practice forgiveness. Believe in forgiveness. It will strengthen the family.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor Henry. Thank you, Reverend Dr. Roger Samuel. Thank you, Pastor Joseph. I was truly blessed by tonight, even the intervention. I have like 4 pages of notes, but I think to summarize, instrumental willingness to change for the benefit of us. Boundaries. It is not who we are it is who we are that are the boundaries. Forgiveness being premeditated, know who you are and what you want. Your vision or boundaries might change, but we stay together and purpose. Excellent, amazing, hard to practice, but I'm sure that, you know, it was Adlan Cruz who would always say about playing the piano, excellence is easy. Because once you start practicing and you've put in that 10,000 hours, you know, it becomes it becomes who you are. And so I think once we work at it, it becomes easy. And then a principle to strengthen the family, empathetic listening. The idea of team must be considered so that we compromise, so that we go the extra mile, so that the team wins together. And then that premeditated forgiveness again. You know, I was truly blessed. That's all I can say. I see some more comments coming in. Someone says they got in late, but a really great session, and thank you all for the input. We just want to thank you guys, both those of you joining us on Zoom, and I still see we have persons joining us on YouTube. We do pay attention. So anytime you feel like you want to comment or ask your questions on Zoom, please know that we do consider you a part of our community. So you can always share the comments there. Thank you for joining us. This has been another episode of Real Talk Family Life. I'm going to hand over to the panelists just to see if they have one final statement that they want to make. And then Pastor Henry, you can talk to us about what's coming up for the July-August vacation. So Pastor Griffith, Reverend Dr. Roger Samuel, and then Pastor Henry, do you have one final statement to make? If not, over to you, Pastor Henry.
Yeah, those of us who have found ourselves in marriage, we must consider that we are fortunate, because I know there are others who would like to get married and who might not get the opportunity, and there are those who had it and probably lose it. So for those of us who are in it and who are contemplating it, let us value it and let's do all that we can to make it work, because it is not, I keep saying we are living in a consumer world where things are not made to last, but marriage must never adopt that characteristic. It's made to last. Therefore, you don't just throw it off and pick another one. I hope that is useful.
I think, like I said before, family is God's idea. And if we should have any success in our family life, that can only be achieved by living by God's principles. And it's very simple. I mean, sometimes when we talk about these ideas and these ideas, they sound so difficult and so impossible. But if we practice, it becomes habit, and then it becomes lifestyle. Everything that God asks us to do may seem difficult and seems impossible. But even those big, most challenging things, it starts with a practice. And once we practice, then it becomes the habit, and then becomes lifestyle. Or look at it this way: a seed, a tree, and then a fruit. The seed is planted, the tree grows, and the fruit comes after. So we just have to practice, habit, and it becomes lifestyle. So what is a challenge for others will be a lifestyle for us. Blessed.
Thank you very much, Dr. Samuel. Thank you very much, Dr. Sutherland. We have some very interesting programs that are coming up in the months of July, August, and into September. We will be talking about preparing the child. And so our next program on July 19 is entitled Preparing the Child for Social Relationships. And we want you to be a part of all of the programs, because you know, if you miss one, you're going to miss a lot going forward. And so on August the 2nd, Preparing the Child for Spiritual Identity. And that is going to be a big one, because many a times we miss that golden opportunity to bring our children to know Christ as their Lord and Savior. And so we have the professionals coming in on that one also, and talking about preparing the child for spiritual identity. On the 16th, we are entertaining the youths, and they're going to be dealing with challenges of social and spiritual identity in a youth program. On the 30th, preparing the child for a career. And then on September September 13, Preparing the Child for Parenthood. And so we hope that you would join us for all of these programs as we continue. Thank you for being a part of the Real Talk program. We want to beg of you. There's so many more people outside there need help. We see different faces every week. Some of our panelists are here with us, and past panelists, I'm seeing Mrs. Donna Bab Agard. I think I saw Sister Bowler is there also. Am I missing anybody else? Brother Pierre. So nice having all of you, our past panelists on the program this evening, and Dr. Jones, nice having you. Yes, so we're going to be hearing from some of them as we continue into the months of August, July and August, so into September. So thank you very much for joining us, and I'm going to hand it back to Dr. Sutherland. She usually does her thing at this time, so let me just hand it right back to her. But we look forward to seeing you in the next week, or next 2 weeks when we meet again on Real Talk Family Life. You're muted, Dr. Sutherland.
I was saying thank you, Pastor Henry. We're going to end the live stream. This is where we're going to the second half of the discussion. We try to stay on for 5 or 10 minutes for